Did you know that Hawaii isn't even in North America? Or that you've been misled about what you can see from space? What if I told you? You've been lied to about the number of continents that even exist. Today, we're diving into a labyrinth of long-standing geographical myths, some passed down through textbooks, others whispered into pop culture. From ancient navigators to modern misconceptions, we'll journey through 50 geography truths that are totally fake, and yet, almost everyone believes them. Fact 50. Antarctica versus the South Pole. It's easy to think they're the same. After all, every time we talk about Antarctica, we picture the South Pole. But the truth? Antarctica is a vast continent, the fifth largest on Earth, spanning over 5.5 million square miles. The South Pole, it's a single pinpoint. It marks the Earth's rotational axis. And while it lies deep within Antarctica, it's just one lonely coordinate on a frozen empire. 7 countries lay claim to overlapping sectors of this icy domain, including Australia, the UK, and Chile. Fact 49. There are 4 South Poles. Yes, 4. The geographic South Pole marks the axis. The magnetic South Pole is where Earth's magnetic field points vertically upwards, and it moves over time. The geomagnetic South Pole is calculated based on Earth's dipole magnetic field, and is currently in a completely different location. Then there's the pole of inaccessibility, the point on Antarctica that's the hardest to reach, being the farthest from any coastline. If the South Pole is the celebrity, these others are its less glamorous cousins. Fact 48. The Great Wall of China, invisible from space. Remember hearing this in school? That the Great Wall is the only human-made object visible from space? Hate to break it to you, but that's flat out wrong. NASA astronauts have repeatedly said it's nearly impossible to see with the naked eye from low Earth orbit, because the wall is narrow and blends into its surroundings. What is visible? Airports, cities, highways. But the Great Wall? Only with a powerful zoom lens and ideal conditions. Fact 47. Greenland is not the size of Africa. Blame it on Mercator. The Mercator projection, invented in 1569, was revolutionary for sailors. It made navigation simple by preserving angles. But it came at a cost. Land masses near the poles got inflated like balloons. Greenland, while appearing enormous, is actually just 836,000 square miles, compared to Africa's 11.7 million. In reality, 14 Greenlands can fit into Africa with space to spare. The Mercator map? Useful for crossing oceans, terrible for teaching geography. Fact 46. Africa is much bigger than you think. The continent is criminally underestimated. Africa can swallow the US, all of Western Europe, China, and still have room for leftovers. It's also home to over 1.4 billion people and more than 2,000 distinct languages. From the Sahara, the largest hot desert, to the Congo rainforest, second only to the Amazon, Africa is as massive as it is diverse. Yet decades of map distortions have minimized its visual and cultural footprint. Fact 45. Finland is not part of Scandinavia. At first glance, Finland seems like a natural fit for Scandinavia. It borders Sweden, it's cold and forested, and its people love saunas and cross-country skiing. But geopolitically and linguistically, Finland walks a path of its own. While Sweden, Norway, and Denmark share North Germanic languages, offshoots of Old Norse, Finnish comes from the Uralic language family, which is about as related to Swedish as Japanese is to Italian. Fact 44. The Nile might not be the longest river. For generations, textbooks proclaimed the Nile as the reigning king of rivers, stretching majestically across 11 African countries. But in recent years, a challenger has emerged: the Amazon. The debate hinges on how you define the source of a river, how many tributaries are included, and whether seasonal flows count. In 2007, a team of Brazilian scientists undertook a 14-day expedition and traced a new source of the Amazon that might just make it longer, by about 60 miles. Why does this matter? Because the length of rivers has implications for ecosystems, geopolitics, and climate patterns. The Nile gives life to Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. But the Amazon carries more water than the next 7 largest rivers combined. It's a reminder that longest doesn't always mean biggest, and that even geography's greatest champions can be dethroned. Fact 43. Europe's tallest peak. Isn't Mont Blanc or the Matterhorn Mountains are more than just giant rocks. They're symbols of national pride. And for many, the Alps conjure up names like Mont Blanc and the Matterhorn. But while those peaks dominate postcards, they don't top the charts. That honor goes to Mount Elbrus in southern Russia. Standing at nearly 18,510 feet, 5,642 meters, it dwarfs its alpine cousins. So why the confusion? Because Russia spans 2 continents, and Elbrus sits in the Caucasus near the fuzzy, often debated border between Europe and Asia. But geographers largely agree. Elbrus lies on the European side. So next time you hear someone refer to Mont Blanc as Europe's highest peak, you'll know better. It's not even close. Fact 42. There's no universally agreed line. Between Europe and Asia borders are often arbitrary, but few are fuzzier than the one between Europe and Asia. Unlike oceans or rivers, there's no obvious geological divide, just a single vast landmass known as Eurasia. So how do we draw the line? Some say the Ural Mountains mark the eastern edge of Europe. Others trace it down the Ural River or the Caspian Sea. Still others include parts of the Caucasus, drawing the line through Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia. The result? A geopolitical shrug. Depending on the map, cities like Baku might be Asian or European. Even Istanbul, the city that bridges continents, embodies this ambiguity. So next time someone tells you they're technically in Europe, ask which map they're using. Fact 41. Egypt is not fully in Africa. We often think of Egypt as an African nation, and it mostly is. But not entirely. The Suez Canal, long a symbol of maritime power, also marks a tectonic and continental divide. Everything west of the canal, including Cairo, the pyramids, and the Nile Delta, is in Africa. But cross over to the Sinai Peninsula, and you're in Asia. This transcontinental identity shapes Egypt's politics, economy, and military strategy. It's a key player in African Union discussions and Middle Eastern diplomacy. Its foot in both worlds makes it a geopolitical bridge and a wild card. Fact 40. Part of Kazakhstan is in Europe. Kazakhstan is one of the largest landlocked countries on Earth, and most people assume it's firmly in Asia. But cartographers consider the land west of the Ural River to be European territory. That includes the Atarau region and parts of western Kazakhstan. Fact 39. Russia is neither fully European nor Asian. Russia is geography's ultimate liminal space. Covering more than 6.6 million square miles and 11 time zones, it straddles both Europe and Asia like a geopolitical colossus. Roughly 77% of its landmass is in Asia, yet 75% of its population lives in the European part. Its architecture echoes Paris, its literature inspired Europe's intellectuals, but its landscapes stretch through the Siberian taiga into the Pacific. In short, Russia is both and neither. The term Eurasia exists because of it. Fact 38. The world doesn't necessarily have 7 continents. How many continents are there? Seems like a simple question, but it's not. The 7-continent model, Africa, Antarctica, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, South America, is most popular in English-speaking countries. But in Latin America and parts of Europe, it's common to count only 6, combining North and South America into just America. And in some places, like parts of Eastern Europe and Asia, the answer is 5, excluding Antarctica altogether. Others say there are only 4, based on plate tectonics and true separation by oceans: Afro-Eurasia, the Americas, Australia, and Antarctica. Fact 37. Holland is not a synonym for the Netherlands. People often use Holland to refer to the entire Netherlands, but that's like calling the entire United States California. Holland refers specifically to 2 western provinces, North Holland and South Holland, where major cities like Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and The Hague reside. Because these regions were the most influential during the Dutch Golden Age, when ships sailed under flags marked Holland, the name stuck. But today, it's more accurate and respectful to say the Netherlands. The Dutch themselves will thank you. Fact 36. Great Britain is not equal to United Kingdom. Here's a quick geography quiz. Is Scotland part of England? Is Northern Ireland on the island of Britain? Confused? You're not alone. Great Britain refers to the island containing England, Scotland, and Wales. The United Kingdom, or UK, includes all of those plus Northern Ireland, which shares the island of Ireland with the Republic of Ireland. Mixing them up might seem harmless, but in a post-Brexit world where national identity is fiercely debated, the distinction matters, especially to those who aren't English. Fact 35. Iceland is not all ice. Iceland must be freezing. That's what people assume. And who can blame them? It's right there in the name. But this frosty branding was actually a historical accident. Back in the 9th century, a Norse explorer named Rafna Floki Vilgerdarson sailed westward and stumbled upon the island. After trekking into the highlands and seeing a fjord filled with ice, he named the entire place Eland, Iceland. Fact 34. Lagos is not the capital of Nigeria. Say Nigeria, and most people picture Lagos, a pulsating mega-metropolis of over 20 million people, overflowing with energy, culture, and traffic. But here's the twist. Lagos hasn't been the capital since 1991. The real capital is Abuja, a purpose-built city located in the very heart of Nigeria. Why move the capital? Strategic neutrality. Lagos, while commercially dominant, was on the coast and seen as favoring the Yoruba ethnic group. Abuja, on the other hand, was built from scratch in the center of the country to reduce ethnic and geographic bias. A clean slate. It's more than a capital. It's a symbol of unity. And yes, fun fact, it's located near Magic Land Abuja, formerly known as Wonderland, the first major amusement park in the country. Turns out even politics has a sense of whimsy. Fact 33. Antarctica is the world's largest desert. When you hear desert, your brain likely conjures endless waves of golden sand, camels, and scorching sun. But technically, deserts aren't defined by heat, they're defined by dryness. By that standard, Antarctica, the land of eternal ice, is actually the largest desert on Earth. It spans over 5.5 million square miles, 14.2 million square kilometers, making it bigger than the Sahara, Arabian, Gobi, and Kalahari combined. And while it may look like a frozen ocean, the average precipitation across the continent is less than 2 inches, 50 millimeters, per year, drier than most hot deserts. So yes, penguins live in a desert. Wrap your head around that one. Fact 32. The Sahara isn't even the driest desert. If Antarctica is the largest, then what's the driest? That title belongs to the Atacama Desert in northern Chile. This place is so bone dry, parts of it haven't seen rain in over 500 years. That means no rainfall since the Spanish conquistadors arrived. Scientists use it to test Mars rovers because its conditions are so similar to the red planet. Ultraviolet radiation, salty soil, and all. In comparison, the Sahara Desert gets about 3 inches, 76 millimeters, of rain per year, a veritable flood compared to the Atacama. The misconception persists because the Sahara is vast and famous. But the Atacama, it's nature's best-kept secret. Fact 31. Not all deserts have sand. Hollywood has lied to you. The golden sand dunes of Lawrence of Arabia and Aladdin are beautiful, but misleading. Deserts come in many forms: rocky, icy, salty, even volcanic. The Gobi Desert is mostly bare rock and gravel. The Atacama has salt flats. And Antarctica is, of course, entirely ice. In fact, sandy deserts, called ergs, only make up about 20% of the world's deserts. The rest? Far less Instagrammable. So next time someone says desert, don't automatically picture sand. Picture extremes in temperature, moisture, and survival. Fact 30. Everest isn't the tallest mountain. Depending how you measure. Everyone learns. Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. And yes, if you measure from sea level, it reaches the highest point at 29,031 feet, 8,848 meters. But that's not the whole story. Let's talk Mauna Kea in Hawaii. From its underwater base on the ocean floor to its summit, it rises more than 33,500 feet, 10,210 meters. That's over 4,000 feet taller than Everest. You just don't see it, because most of it's submerged. And then there's Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador. While it's much lower in elevation, it sits right on the equatorial bulge, the fattest part of the Earth's spinning ellipsoid. That means Chimborazo's summit is the farthest point from the Earth's center, making it the closest point on Earth to outer space. In other words, Everest may win the traditional crown, but geography loves a good plot twist. Fact 29. Earth isn't a sphere. Globes are spherical, sure. But Earth? Not quite. Our planet is an oblate spheroid, meaning it's slightly flattened at the poles and bulged at the equator. That's due to centrifugal force from the planet's rotation. Think of it like a spinning water balloon. It squishes out in the middle. This tiny flattening, about 13 miles, 21 kilometers, makes a big difference when calculating distances, satellite orbits, or determining the closest point to space. Remember Chimborazo? Yet most models still show a perfect sphere because it's easier to build, teach, and market. But reality, it's always a little warped. Fact 28. Toronto is not the capital of Canada. It's Canada's largest city, the cultural epicenter of English-speaking media, and often mistaken for the capital. But it's not. That honor belongs to Ottawa, a quieter, colder city located on the border of Ontario and Quebec. The reason? Politics. When Queen Victoria was asked to choose a capital in the 1850s, she picked Ottawa because it was defensible, centrally located, and sat right between English-speaking Ontario and French-speaking Quebec, a strategic compromise. Toronto may be the pulse, but Ottawa is the brain. Fact 27. Geneva is not Switzerland's capital. You've heard of Geneva Conventions. You've heard of Geneva as the home of the Red Cross, the UN's European headquarters, and countless international treaties. So it must be the capital of Switzerland, right? Wrong. The capital is Bern, chosen in 1848 to avoid favoring Switzerland's financial centers, like Zurich. Bern is understated, charming, and politically neutral, the kind of city that gets the job done without drawing attention. Geneva? It's the international face. But Bern is the quiet engine behind Swiss governance. Fact 26. Antarctica isn't as big as it looks. Pull out a standard Mercator map, and Antarctica looks like a frozen supercontinent the size of the entire Pacific Ocean. But that's just cartographic distortion. The Mercator projection stretches land masses near the poles to absurd proportions. In reality, Antarctica is the fifth largest continent, bigger than Europe or Australia, but significantly smaller than Asia, Africa, or the Americas. You can fit the US and Mexico into it, but not all of South America. On a globe, it looks manageable. On a map, it looks like the world's final boss. Fact 25. The Mississippi isn't the longest river in the US. You've heard the name in songs, seen it snake through the heartland of America, and read about it in school textbooks as the lifeblood of US trade and culture. The Mississippi River is iconic, but it's not the longest in the country. That honor belongs to the Missouri River, a winding, less famous tributary of the Mississippi that stretches 200 miles, 322 kilometers, farther. At 2,540 miles, 4,087 kilometers long, it flows from the Rocky Mountains of western Montana, weaving through the Great Plains before finally joining its better-known sibling in St. Louis. So technically, the Missouri-Mississippi River system is one of the longest on Earth. But if we're talking names, Missouri wins the solo crown. Fact 24. South Africa has 3 capitals, and none of them are Johannesburg. It's one of Africa's most developed nations, famous for its landscapes, Nelson Mandela, and, apparently, capital confusion. Many assume Johannesburg is the capital because it's South Africa's biggest and most internationally known city. But the truth? South Africa shares the job between three different cities: Pretoria, executive capital, where the president's office is; Cape Town, legislative capital, where parliament meets; Bloemfontein, judicial capital, home of the Supreme Court of Appeal. Why the split? After the formation of the Union of South Africa in 1910, the government wanted to unify formerly competing colonies without favoring any single one. It's an attempt at geographic and political balance, and it's still in effect today. Fact 23. Maine isn't the easternmost U.S. state. Look at any U.S. map, and Maine juts out like the East Coast's front porch. It's the farthest northeast of the lower 48 states, so of course, it must be the easternmost state in America. Right? Wrong. The easternmost point of the United States is actually in Alaska. Yep, Alaska. Here's why. The Aleutian Islands stretch so far west that they wrap around the 180th meridian and enter the eastern hemisphere. The island of Semisopochnoi, in particular, sits just 10 miles, 16 kilometers, west of the 180th line, meaning it's technically farther east than Maine, even though it's west of the mainland U.S. Fact 22. Hawaii is not part of North America politically. Hawaii is the 50th state of the United States. Geographically, it's not even on the same tectonic plate as North America. Hawaii is part of Oceania, specifically the subregion known as Polynesia, a vast Pacific triangle stretching between Hawaii, New Zealand, and Easter Island. It shares more with islands like Samoa, Tonga, and Tahiti than with California or Texas. Linguistically and culturally, too, Hawaiians are Polynesian. Their language is closely related to Maori, Tongan, and Tahitian. Their mythology, traditions, and even navigation techniques come from Pacific seafaring civilizations, not the American West. So while Hawaii is an American state, it's not North American. It's a Pacific outpost with a history and identity all its own. Fact 21. Europe is not directly east of the United States. Imagine sailing straight east from New York. Where do you land? France? England? Not quite. Most of Europe actually sits farther north than people realize. London, for example, is at 51.5 degrees north, farther north than any city in the contiguous United States. Even Rome is on the same latitude as Chicago. The reason people get confused is because of how world maps flatten out the globe. The Mercator projection pulls Europe lower and stretches it horizontally, giving the illusion that it's directly across the Atlantic. Fact 20. The Gulf Stream isn't what warms Europe. We've all heard this. Europe is warm despite being so far north because of the Gulf Stream, right? Not exactly. While the Gulf Stream, a warm ocean current flowing from the Gulf of Mexico to the North Atlantic, does play a role, recent research suggests it's not the dominant force. The real culprit? Atmospheric circulation and heat storage by the Atlantic Ocean. In simple terms, the air over Europe is kept mild thanks to prevailing westerly winds and the ocean's ability to store and gradually release heat over seasons. The Gulf Stream helps, but it's like giving credit to the appetizer for a 5-course meal. In fact, parts of Western Europe are warmer than comparable regions in Canada because of wind patterns, not just ocean currents. Fact 19. The world has 5 oceans, not 4. For most of the 20th century, we were taught there were 4 oceans: Atlantic, Pacific, Indian, and Arctic. But in 1999, scientists at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, proposed a 5th, the Southern Ocean. It wraps around Antarctica, stretching from the coast to 60 degrees south latitude. It's massive, covering nearly 7% of the Earth's ocean surface. Yet many maps and school systems still don't label it. In 2021, the National Geographic Society finally added the Southern Ocean to its maps. It's a critical piece of the planet's climate system, circulating cold water that helps regulate temperatures across the globe. So if you're still counting 4 oceans, you're a fact short. Fact 18. Australia is not the world's largest island. This one's about definitions. People often call Australia the largest island, but technically it's a continent. By most geographical standards, continents are large land masses that sit on their own tectonic plates and contain a variety of climates and ecosystems. That means Australia qualifies, even though it's only about the size of the contiguous US. So what's the largest island? Greenland. It spans about 836,000 square miles, all of it surrounded by ocean, but not large or geologically diverse enough to be a continent. In short, Australia is a continent pretending to be an island. Greenland is an island dreaming of continent status. Fact 17. Greenland is not a country. Greenland may look like a massive independent landmass on your map, but it's not a sovereign nation. It's an autonomous territory of the Kingdom of Denmark. That means while it governs many of its own domestic affairs, education, healthcare, and resources, Denmark handles its military defense, foreign policy, and most financial backing. Only about 57,000 people live there, mostly Inuit, scattered across a snowy expanse the size of Mexico. In recent years, Greenland has increased its push toward independence. But for now, it's still under the Danish crown. Fact 16. Most of Africa is above the equator. We often think of Africa as a southern hemisphere continent. Maybe it's the heat, the savannas, or just how it's placed on common maps. But that's misleading. In reality, 2/3 of Africa lies above the equator. Countries like Algeria, Egypt, Nigeria, and even Kenya are entirely or mostly in the northern hemisphere. So why do people think otherwise? Perhaps because some of Africa's most iconic wildlife footage, Serengeti migrations, rainforest gorillas, Zambezi waterfalls, is filmed below the equator. But the bulk of the landmass, population, and economies are in the north. The continent straddles the equator, but its center of gravity tilts upward. Fact 15. Lakes are not the largest source of freshwater. Most people imagine the world's freshwater locked away in Great Lakes, Lake Superior, Lake Baikal, the Great Lakes of North America. But they're not the main source. In reality, about 68% of the world's fresh water is frozen, locked in glaciers and polar ice caps. Another 30% is buried underground in aquifers. That means only about 1% of all fresh water is available in lakes, rivers, and swamps. Fact 14. France spans the most time zones. Not Russia. Russia stretches across 11 time zones. Impressive, yes, but it doesn't hold the crown. That title belongs to France, thanks to its overseas territories. France spans 12 time zones, and if you include daylight saving time, that number jumps to 13 when certain territories shift independently. So yes, somewhere on Earth, it's always French o'clock. Fact 13. China no longer has the world's largest population. For decades, China topped every population chart, with over 1.4 billion people. But in April 2023, that changed. India officially overtook China, reaching an estimated 1.46 billion people. The shift was inevitable. India's population has been growing rapidly despite recent drops in birth rate, while China's one-child policy, in place for over 35 years, slowed growth drastically. In fact, China's population began declining for the first time in over 60 years. The North and South poles are arbitrary human constructs. You'd think the poles, the North and South, are based on natural truth. But even those are, to a degree, man-made illusions. The magnetic poles shift over time due to changes in the Earth's molten core. The geomagnetic poles are mathematical averages, and the geographic poles, the fixed axis around which Earth spins, are only fixed in terms of human convention. In fact, the designation of North and South itself is entirely arbitrary. In ancient Egyptian maps, South was at the top. There's no universal up or down in space. We just chose North to be up on maps because most of the world's landmass and population is in the northern hemisphere, and because early European mapmakers made the maps. So yes, the poles are real, but which one goes on top? That's just human ego. Fact 10. New Zealand isn't the closest country to Australia. Maps often portray Australia and New Zealand as cozy neighbors. But looks can be deceiving. The closest country to Australia is actually Papua New Guinea. At its narrowest point, the two nations are just 2.5 miles apart, separated by the Torres Strait. New Zealand, on the other hand, lies over 930 miles, southeast of Australia's coast. That's a longer distance than Los Angeles to Denver. So why the confusion? Because Western-centric world maps tend to place Australia and New Zealand in a tidy lower right corner, isolated and shrunk. It's cartographic trickery at its finest. Fact 9. Equatorial countries aren't always hot. If a place sits on the equator, it must be sweltering, right? Not necessarily. Altitude changes everything. Take Quito, Ecuador. It sits just south of the equator, but also at 9,350 feet above sea level. Its average year-round temperature? A pleasant 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Mountains in equatorial countries like Colombia, Kenya, and Tanzania create microclimates that can be chilly, misty, and even snowy. At the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, temperatures regularly drop below freezing, despite being just 3 degrees from the equator. So next time you picture the equator as a ring of tropical sweat, remember, geography has layers. Fact 8. Central America is part of North America. This one trips people up. Countries like Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica are often mentally grouped with South America. Culturally, they share traits: Spanish language, Latin roots, vibrant traditions. But geographically, they are part of North America. The dividing line between the North and South American continents is the border between Panama and Colombia, marked by the Darien Gap, a dense, impassable jungle with no roads. So even though Latin America spans both continents culturally, Central American countries like Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Belize are all firmly North American. Fact 7. Portugal is not a Mediterranean country. Portugal is warm. It's coastal. It borders Spain, but it's not Mediterranean. To be classified as a Mediterranean country, a nation must border the Mediterranean Sea, which Portugal does not. Instead, it faces the Atlantic Ocean. The Mediterranean ends at the Strait of Gibraltar, which separates Spain from Morocco. This distinction affects Portugal's climate, ocean currents, and even its maritime history. It wasn't the Mediterranean, but the Atlantic that launched Portugal's golden age of exploration, sending ships to India, Brazil, and beyond. So while Portugal feels Mediterranean in spirit, it's not one by definition. Fact 6. Venice isn't the city of canals. Not the biggest one, anyway. Venice's gondolas. Moonlit waters, narrow waterways. It's one of the world's most romanticized canal cities. But in terms of sheer mileage, it's not even number 1. That honor goes to Amsterdam, which boasts over 60 miles of canals, compared to Venice's 30.7 miles, 49.4 kilometers. Even Birmingham, England, yes, Birmingham, has more canals than Venice, clocking in at over 35 miles. Of course, Venice's charm isn't about quantity. It's about history, architecture, and atmosphere. But if we're measuring by the numbers, the City of Canals is more title than technicality. Fact 5. The Statue of Liberty isn't entirely in New York. Lady Liberty, the symbol of freedom, standing proud in New York Harbor. Or, is she in New Jersey? Technically, Liberty Island is located within New Jersey's waters. However, the island itself is administered by the federal government and officially associated with New York. It's a geographical tug-of-war that dates back to 1664. Fact 4. You can see Russia from Alaska. No, this isn't a meme. It's a real thing. On a clear day, you can indeed see Russia from Alaska, specifically from Little Diomede Island, which belongs to the US, and lies just 2.4 miles from Big Diomede, owned by Russia. Between them, the international dateline, which makes the view not just a look across geography, but across time itself. It's tomorrow on Big Diomede, while it's still today on Little Diomede. And yes, from Cape Prince of Wales, the westernmost point on mainland Alaska, it's possible to glimpse the Siberian coastline about 50 miles away. So no joke, The two countries really are neighbors, close enough to wave. Fact 3. The U.S. borders. 3 oceans, not just 2. In school, most Americans learn that the U.S. is bordered by 2 oceans, the Atlantic to the east and the Pacific to the west. But there's a third ocean in the mix, the Arctic Ocean, bordering Alaska in the far north. This northern coastline stretches over 1,000 miles and includes remote areas like Prudhoe Bay and Barrow, Utqiagvik, the northernmost city in the U.S. Why does this matter? Because the Arctic Ocean is fast becoming a geopolitical hotspot. Melting ice is opening new shipping lanes and untapped resources, and countries like the US, Russia, and Canada are all eyeing strategic advantages. So yes, the United States is a 3-ocean country, and Alaska holds the key. Fact 2. There aren't exactly 195 countries in the world. The number 195 is a common answer, and it's based on 193 UN member states, plus 2 observer states, the Vatican and Palestine. But reality isn't so neat. There are several partially recognized or disputed territories that claim independence and operate as de facto countries. Taiwan, recognized by only a few nations but self-governed and globally influential. Kosovo, recognized by over 100 UN members but blocked by others. Fact 1. People knew the Earth was round long before Columbus. One of the most enduring geography myths is that Columbus proved the Earth was round, that he set sail against flat Earth beliefs, risking falling off the edge. But the truth? Ancient Greeks figured it out 2,000 years before Columbus. Aristotle observed lunar eclipses and noticed the Earth's round shadow on the moon. Eratosthenes measured the Earth's circumference using just sticks and shadows, and got astonishingly close. By the time Columbus sailed in 1492, most educated Europeans already knew the Earth was round. The real debate was how big it was, and how far Asia lay west of Europe. Columbus didn't prove the world was round. He proved you could make a terrible calculation, and still accidentally change history. Here on Map Locked, we don't just read maps, we decode them, we question them, we redraw them, with curiosity, clarity, and just a pinch of wonder. If this video bent your brain, don't stop here. The journey continues. Watch this next on Map Locked. 30 mind-blowing geography facts most people get wrong. It's already live and linked right here on your screen. In that episode, we uncover a place where fire burns underwater, a country with no rivers, and the city that literally moves every year. Tap it now. Your mental map will never look the same again. And as always, thanks for exploring with us. This is Map Locked, where the world is never what it seems.